Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first IEEE STEM Summit. I'm Lorena Garcia, Chair of the IEEE Educational Activities Pre-University Education
Hello, everyone.
Coordinating
Welcome to the
Committee.
first IEEE STEM.
And I'm very excited for being today with all of you. This is an event we have created for all of our IEEE volunteers and anyone engaged or interested in pre-university STEM outreach, with the goal of building our STEM community by coming together to encourage, support, and inspire each other. We have prepared a very interesting and inspiring agenda, and we really hope you enjoy it. Before starting, I want to share a little housekeeping item with you. Well, the event is broken into stages, sessions, networking, and exhibit hall. Navigate using the left-hand menu. All sessions will be recorded for later viewing. During the presentations today, post your speaker questions into the chat to the right of the event window. Make sure to participate in the STEM Summit Challenge to win prizes. You can find a link on the Summit reception page. The winners will be announced at the Expo on Friday. The exhibit hall will open today and remain open throughout the week. Exhibitors will be live on Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. ET. Join the continued STEM Summit conversation on our Collaborative and Facebook communities. You can also find the links on the reception page. Make sure to get your participation certificate and badge from the Summit reception page too. So, to start, let me introduce Stephen Phillips, IEEE VP Educational Activities 2021, to welcome us to the event. Stephen Phillips earned the BS degree at Cornell University and the MS and PhD degrees at Stanford University in electrical engineering. He currently leads the School of Electrical, Computer, and Energy Engineering at Arizona State University as its first director. He's a professional engineer registered in Ohio and has served as a program evaluator for ABET. He was elected by the IEEE Assembly as 2020 IEEE Vice President and 2021 Educational Activities. His teaching and research interests are, sorry. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Lorena. I realized the slide got cut off there.
Yeah, sorry.
My teaching and research interests are in
Thank you.
control systems, and also more recently I focused a lot on web-based delivery of academic programs and accreditation. So thanks very much, Lorena. I also want to welcome everyone to this IEEE STEM Summit. You know, our volunteers and staff, under the great leadership of Lorena, have put this event together. This year, in large part, has been a year where IEEE Education Activities is focusing a great deal on pre-university and STEM outreach in particular. Part of that emphasis is because this is a particular interest of the IEEE president. And so I'm pleased to introduce Kathy Land, who is the IEEE president. She has more than 30 years of industry experience in software engineering and management of information systems and leadership of large software teams. She serves as the Entrepreneurial Board of Directors Liaison for IEEE, has been Vice President of Technical Activities, and has had other roles in various parts of the IEEE. Most importantly, of course, she is the current president of IEEE. So Kathy, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I'm very excited about this event today. It was an idea that came early in the year when we were in one of our STEM steering committee meetings. And I really give credit to Lorena. It was her brainchild. Okay, so we have the first slide. Thank you. So I do want to thank all of you for joining us today. As you've heard, reaching kids with STEM education is extremely important to me. This is because children have a natural curiosity and inquisitiveness, and STEM can foster this, instilling a passion and drive to learn that will follow them far into adulthood. And that's why I'm delighted to be here to share with you some of the many ways that IEEE makes a difference in the world through education, and to encourage all of you to be a part of it. Next slide. So we know that to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow, we will need global, diverse viewpoints and experiences, and we need these voices in STEM careers. And that's where IEEE plays a critical role. Our global reach as a membership organization helps us to bring educational experiences to every corner of the globe, increasing the diversity of our industries and the viewpoints that will shape the future. Our members are working locally in classrooms, presenting through meetings, webinars, and technical conferences, offering articles and videos and podcasts, and the list goes on and on. It's pretty incredible what IEEE is able to do. Every day, our members are advancing technology for humanity through education, and this is helping us to meet the challenges of the future. Next slide. So the mission and vision of IEEE helps us shape the future of technology for the benefit of humanity. And an important way that we do this is through education from children who are just being introduced to STEM concepts and developing a love for them, to university students who are beginning the pursuit of a meaningful career, to university faculty who are constantly seeking innovative ways to inspire their students through engineering and technology, to working and senior professionals who are dedicated to ongoing professional development. IEEE is a home for lifelong learning and development. Engineers and technologists are working on solutions to many of the global challenges that we are facing today. And these include infrastructure, sustainable development, COVID-19, energy, universal broadband access, and there are many more. STEM and technology education is crucial to help us not only to solve today's issues, but also to prepare for the challenges of tomorrow. Next slide. So it's not only enough to educate working engineers and technologists, but we have to start young to help kids understand the importance and possibilities of STEM careers. So research shows that when students are presented with an integrated STEM curriculum, their understanding of basic STEM concepts is improved. It also shows that their likelihood of entering a STEM profession increases significantly. STEM students are better prepared to use learned engineering processes when attempting to solve problems in other situations or courses. Students learn and build skills when these basic competencies are applied to a variety of situations, including making room for student innovation and original design. Additionally, research shows that attitudes towards STEM fields improve. Getting students in the earliest grades excited about and comfortable with these topics is key to increasing access to STEM fields and increasing the STEM workforce as a whole. And we should tell kids who have an aptitude for sciences that a career in technology is a career where they will be in high demand and where they will never lack for opportunities. We should also emphasize that jobs in technical fields will provide for lifelong learning, excitement, and satisfaction, and that these jobs will never become boring or routine. Next slide. So let's start by looking at some of the programs that we have for pre-university students and teachers. Remember, our vision here is that youth will see themselves as someone who can improve the world through engineering, technology, and computing, while IEEE volunteers and members are doing many of the activities to engage pre-university students. Let's start by looking at just a few of these programs. Next slide. So two pre-university programs include, so we have the STEM portal. Okay, thank you. It switched on me there. So we have Two pre-university programs, the IEEE REACH and the Spectrum Robots. The REACH program is a project of the IEEE History Center. Understanding technology and history are not mutually exclusive subjects. So REACH provides history teachers with free educational resources that situate science, technology, and engineering in their social and humanistic contexts. The program offers inquiry units that include reading, hands-on activities, multimedia sources, and more to engage students and help them explore how STEM fields impact their everyday lives. And you can see more about this at reach.ieee.org. And Robots is a product of IEEE Spectrum, and this is the flagship publication of IEEE. And you can find more about this at robots.ieee.org. And it's a website designed to introduce students to the exciting world of robotics and robotics engineering. It features profiles of different robots, and as well as lesson plans, games, and interviews with roboticists. And it's a great resource to get kids excited about STEM while they learn about robots. It's interesting to know that the IEEE Robots app has been downloaded over 1.3 million times, and it's used in STEM programs all over the world. And again, you can check it out at robots.ieee.org. Next slide. So I'm very excited to talk about the new IEEE Volunteer STEM portal, which was launched this year. And the objective of this STEM portal is to leverage IEEE's global community to engage and impact as many students as possible, and to increase volunteer and teacher engagement in pre-university science, technology, engineering, and math. It serves as a centralized volunteer resource for all activities across IEEE's operating units. I'm extremely excited to have helped guide this development of this STEM portal, and we're working to empower educators and volunteers to inspire the next generation of tomorrow's technologists today. The portal is a centralized resource, again, for volunteers, where you'll have access to a searchable library of STEM programs being run by engineering and technology professionals, just like you. It includes activities with how-to resources to make it easier for volunteers to develop and implement STEM outreach programs. It also provides a place to collect data and understand the impact the IEEE community is having on pre-university students and educators around the globe. The STEM portal gives volunteers a chance to learn from and support one another as they engage in STEM outreach in their local communities. So I encourage all of you to look into the portal at tryengineering.org and see what opportunities exist. I encourage all of you running STEM programs to post your successful programs for other volunteers to learn from and to use. Together, we can demonstrate the collective impact that IEEE is making and inspiring STEM professionals of tomorrow. Next slide. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some lifelong learning, because learning can't stop when we graduate or when we're youngsters. For those of us in STEM careers know that lifelong learning is essential for career growth and professional development, and IEEE plays a part in an important role in this as well. IEEE is an innovator in providing meaningful educational experiences at every level. So every day our members meet people where they are when they're ready to learn, and support them on their journey of lifelong learning. IEEE members are sharing a wealth of knowledge that brings us forward together and helps us fulfill our mission to advance technology for humanity, and it starts with education. Next slide. So IEEE members also impact education at the university level, supporting both students and faculty. One example of this is the IEEE Extreme. It's a global challenge in which teams of IEEE student members, advised and proctored by an IEEE member and often supported by a student branch, compete in a 24-hour time span against one another to solve a set of programming problems. IEEE student members learn through participation, making it a fun experience where they can earn prizes. And you can find more about this at IEEEextreme.org. Another important program for students is IEEE Eta Kappa Nu, and this is the Engineering Honor Society of IEEE dedicated to encouraging and recognizing excellence in IEEE designated fields of interest. Eta Kappa Nu offers educational events such as the Student Leadership Conference, Pathways to Industry webinars, and much more. And it really encourages service as well. IEEE Eta Kappa Nu connects students to industry as they prepare to enter the workforce, which is incredibly important. I'm proud to be an Eta Kappa Nu member, and I'm inspired when I see their purpose put into action by their student peer advising, their exam prep, their mentoring activities and tutoring programs, and across the Eta Kappa Nu chapters across the globe. IEEE offers many scholarships for students to help them pursue STEM careers. For example, IEEE Powered Energy Society, they have a Scholarship Plus initiative, and it can be found at scholarship.org. And this combines scholarships with industry internships that can lead to real jobs after graduation. These are just a few of the things offered by IEEE and the education initiatives. And you can go to IEEE.org and search and find many more. I'm just touching on a few highlights today. The IEEE Foundation is a critical part of our ability to offer these scholarships, and we sincerely appreciate the many donors who give each year to make this important work possible. IEEE also offers educational resources to faculty, and one of our newest programs is a collaboration between the IEEE Education Society and IEEE Educational's activities called the Teaching Excellence Hub. This website with an editorial board has members from around the globe, offers informative articles and resources specifically related to the practice of teaching at the university level. And it's designed to help teaching faculty excel in their craft and learn new ways of supporting students in engineering and technology education. And you can find more about this at teaching.ieee.org. Next slide. So when it comes to continuing professional education, IEEE provides a wealth of resources to help our members grow in their careers. And this was in direct response to what our members told us they wanted. So, for example, most sections and regions have education outreach chairs that are regularly organizing lectures and meetings to discuss technical topics of interest in support of their membership. You can contact your local IEEE section to learn more about the educational opportunities available locally. Another exciting way to learn about technical topics is through IEEE technical societies. Many of the societies and councils offer a regular educational content through webinars, publications, conferences, and they have resource centers as well. This is a great way to learn from society experts from around the globe in specific fields of interest. So you can find a list of the resource centers at IEEE.org. Click on the Find Your Resource Center button to get started. We've tried to make it pretty easy. Many of our members appreciate the opportunity to learn on their own schedules, and e-learning courses from IEEE make that possible. Many IEEE groups have partnered to provide e-learning content on the IEEE Learning Network. And this is found at iln.ieee.org. This site has over 1,000 courses covering topics in IEEE's fields of interest, and it's a great way to find education from across IEEE all in one place. Next slide. So what does this education look like? What does education from IEEE look like? Well, it takes many forms, and it goes far beyond the classroom. From lesson plans and resources we provide to pre-university teachers, to mentoring, articles, conferences, From competitions to hackathons and service learning to webinars, tutorials, and podcasts, we are providing a wealth of information to IEEE members through their chapters, sections, regions, technical societies, affinity groups, just a wealth of information and a wealth of educational experiences. And we would be here all day if I tried to tell you about every single educational opportunity provided to our volunteers and membership. But I do want to try to highlight some of these. Next slide. So I've shared a lot of the educational programs with you, and I really am only scratching the surface, but there are many educational opportunities offered through IEEE, but I'm proud to announce we're planning an IEEE Education Week, and this will be held 4th through 8th of April in next year, and you'll be able to find links to the educational events and resources from across IEEE on the website, and there'll be lots of opportunities to engage, from games to special offers, digital badges, and much more, and it's my hope that you'll join to find out really what is available across IEEE during this week. And, you can go to the website, start browsing. It's educationweek.ieee.org. You can sign up, so you'll be sent an email and updates as this event draws closer. Next slide. So there are many IEEE groups that have started submitting educational resources and events for the Education Week website. And you can see many of them listed here. And we're just getting started. If your IEEE affiliated group would like to be featured on the website for Education Week, or you'd like to participate, you can fill out a form on the website. Every IEEE group is invited to participate or partner. So we'd love to add your group to this site. So just go to the website and fill out the form and join up. And next slide. Okay, so in closing, I want to thank each of you for attending today, and I encourage you to take advantage of some of the many educational opportunities provided by IEEE by adopting a practice of lifelong learning, and in turn offering education to others. Pay it forward. We help grow this great profession and provide opportunities to the next generation of engineers and technologists. As I said at the beginning, there are many challenges that we face. But we grow our own skills and encourage those coming behind us. We truly are fulfilling our mission to advance technology for humanity. And I want to thank all of you by attending today, by being part of this mission. Thank you.
Working on promoting, motivating, and supporting our volunteers to collectively impact as many students as possible and keep advancing technology for humanity. Thank you so much again. Okay, let me now introduce our first speaker of the IEEE STEM Summit, John Cohn, who will inspire us with the talk Serious Play, an Engineer's Perspective on Fun and Passion at Work. John Cohn is an IBM Fellow in the MIT IBM Watson AI Research Group based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. John earned a Bachelor in Science of Electrical Engineering from MIT and a PhD in Computer Engineering for Carnegie Mellon University, where he was named a Distinguished Alumni in 2014. John has authored more than 40 technical papers, contributed to 4 books, and has more than 120 worldwide patents. In 2005, John was elected a Fellow of the IEEE for contributions to high-speed integrated circuit design. John is active in education issues at a local, state, and national level. In 2019, John was awarded the IEEE CAS John Cohn Education Award for his efforts at STEM promotion. He's so passionate about promoting STEM careers that he has spent 59 days living and inventing in an abandoned steel mill as part of Discovery Channel's technical survival show, The Colony. John lives with his family in a restored 19th century schoolhouse in Jonesville, Vermont, and is eager to share his love of science and technology with anyone who will listen. And we want to listen, of course. John, it's a real pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Lorena and Kathy and Steve. It's such an honor to be here. I am such an IEEE fan person, and I'm so honored to be joined by so many other volunteers, STEM volunteers and teachers. And I'm going to take a different take at the same topic. You heard Kathy talking about the serious things that we are trying to do in the world, and that is why we all love engineering. I'm going to talk to you about one person's perspective on an aspect. I think that there are many roads up this mountain, and we have to figure out how to, as Kathy said, reach the students where they are. And I'm going to talk to you about a reflection of 40 years about the importance of play. And it's a very serious topic. But let me just do a little bit more introduction. I just kind of reflecting back, and I apologize, I'm going to say the word I a lot. This is my story. However, I'm hoping that you can find your own story in some of these applications and some of this message, and find a way of actually bringing that into your own STEM promotion practice. I've recently found a piece of paper, my mother found it, that when I was 8 years old, I had told my mother and my father that I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to go to MIT. Actually, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I was told, oh, you're probably not good enough looking to be an astronaut. I lived in Houston, Texas, where all the astronauts in the US were. Instead, I decided to be an electrical engineer, and I got my wish. I got to go to MIT. I got to be an engineer. And at this point, I've had just the best kind of nerdy career I could ever imagine. I just hit 40 years at IBM. And it's kind of an interesting perspective to look back. But I need to introduce you to a couple of other people. First, I want to introduce you to my late father-in-law, Gabriel Mariano. He also worked for the same company. We both worked for IBM. He worked there for 36 years, and he was hired. He was a first-generation immigrant. He spoke Italian at home. He actually was hired out of that of high school to go to engineering school by IBM. IBM had its own engineering school at the time. And Gabe was this very small man, but very brilliant guy, built these gigantic robots out of stone and hydraulics and pneumatics that were used to make a whole generation of computer. We both agreed on one thing, how wonderful it was to make things. And the thing that Gabe made that was my favorite is my wife, Diane. And Diane is my company issued wife. She also worked for IBM for 8 years. She was a physicist as an undergraduate and has a graduate degree in electronics. The reason I'm introducing you to all of these people, to the three of us, is between the three of us, we have 84 years with one company, with IBM, and 84 years in this field. And that gave me kind of an interesting perspective. Every time you do something for 40 years, it gives you a way of looking back. And actually, this was on the occasion a couple of years ago, the company that I work for, and I'm mentioning my company name, but I think there are many large companies that have this kind of perspective. We've been in business for 111 years. And I had the opportunity to go, because I was the oldest and funniest looking engineer at my company in the state of Vermont, I had to go to the governor and tell him about how my company had just turned 100 years. And it was kind of funny because in the newspaper, there was a picture of me looking kind of old and weird, holding a big semiconductor wafer. And underneath it, it said 100 years. And when I walked into the governor's office, he said, "John, you don't even look like you're 80. And I was like, "Hmm." But I was there to tell him about not just my company, but the industry and how much engineering and electrical engineering, in particular the semiconductors, had advanced in that 100 years and now 110 years. And it was very interesting to reflect on this. I put together a picture that imagined where our company had started, which was actually making things like cheese graters and scales that calculated mechanically. Mechanical calculating machines were the first thing that IBM did. over 100 years ago. And then we actually progressed to electromechanical, where we were turning those mechanical gears and cams with a motor, like the Mach 1 computer that we helped build at Harvard during the Second World War, that could multiply 50 pairs of 10-digit numbers together. And then vacuum tube computers, where like Grace Hopper, the great computer scientist, the greatest computer scientist of our age, really one of them, she coined the word bugs, because moths would fly into these very heated vacuum tube computers and burn up. And as their charred carcasses were then conductive paths. And that's where the word software bugs came from. And then discrete transistors, the kind that my father-in-law worked on, and then CMOS integrated circuits. What we did is each one of these dots is a real computer made by someone in the industry, not just my company, and lined up on how much compute you could buy for the same amount, adjusted for currency inflation, for $1,000 worth of compute. So this is an incredible statement of the growth of engineering and the advances. And, it looks very smooth. I mean, what we would talk about as maybe Moore's law, or what we call Dennard's law in IBM, is maybe from, the 1960s to about 2005. But this is over 100 years. This is a very, very impressive thing. But actually, what's kind of harder to see is it's not smooth. This is a log plot, meaning that the pace of advance is actually increasing, but it doesn't proceed smoothly. It's a bumpy ride. There are these periods of things working great, and then these periods of disruption where everything goes, and you have to take a big leap. And I thought that was a pretty interesting analogy, and I'll tell you why in just a second. I remember, for example, when I joined the company, we were making large computers out of a technology called bipolar transistors. It's just the individual switch. And we could just keep turning that crank and make them go faster. And we were making beautiful, beautiful computers. The 360, the 370, the 390, they just kept getting better and better, but they'd start melting and catching fire occasionally. And we were told that was a business problem, and maybe a physics problem too. And we had to take a leap to a new technology, the CMOS technology that the industry continues to use. But the main point is we had to take a leap across a gap. We had to change what was already working for us. We had to change our approach. We had to change all of our tooling. And not only that, sometimes when you make that leap, the new technology is perhaps slower or something else. And that's exactly what happened. So that was my introduction to the field. And what was interesting about that is that while I think that that's true, the companies that were able to reinvent themselves and retool went on to create new paradigms of computing. Many companies at each one of these junctures couldn't figure out how to navigate that fundamental change. And why I think that's a pretty interesting analogy, because I think life also has that disruptions. And I think each of us could sort of reflect on that. And these are certainly challenging times, whether it's the pandemic, there's racial inequality around the world, there are climate issues, there are so many big topics like the ones that Kathy mentioned. These are all disruptions. And we, in our personal lives, are going to have to face them. And while it's not how much compute you could get for $1,000, it might be how much money you make, or how much responsibility, or how much good you do in the world, or how much fun. And we are each, for my case, my life has had these disruptions, and I would reflect that yours would too. I mean, I knew that I wanted to go to MIT when I was 8, but should I buy the haunted schoolhouse where I'm talking to you from there? I mean, I didn't have to worry. I mean, getting married is a big deal, but IBM issued me the perfect wife. Now we've been together 39 years, but had no, how many kids should you have? Those are Max, Sam, and Gabe. Should you go to graduate school? Should you get a tattoo of your company where you can't show people? That's a longer story. But I'm going to also talk to you later on in this talk about some of these disruptions. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're terrible. Sometimes they're avoidable. Sometimes they're, internal. Sometimes they're external, like pandemic. And again, the same perspective of having to make these leaps from what has worked before to what is new. And I was thinking about this, having come on to my 40th service anniversary from my company and maybe 45th year in the industry. And I was trying to think about what was that message. And it was a very interesting thing because, we all, there was something universal in that, we all have. I'm sure if you think back on your life, there are going to be these disruptions. And I was trying to figure out what was it that could actually, what worked for me, because I would say by any measure, I'm very grateful that I've had a wonderful career. I've been able to meet so many people. It hasn't been easy, but I was trying to figure out how to sum this up. And I had a really interesting opportunity. This is my youngest son, our youngest son, Gabe. I got the scariest request. I mean, when Lorena and Kathy asked me to give this talk, that's scary because I know there's a lot of people out there. But you know what? If this doesn't go well, I disappear, everything goes okay. I had a scarier request for a talk, and that was my son Gabe asked me to speak at his graduation. Now, I live in a town of 600 people near a town of 4,000 people. And if I really messed up, if I sucked as a speaker for that 4,000 people in this small town, I would have to move, And I was trying to sum up because I could remember back in Houston, Texas in 1977, when I graduated from high school, sitting on a really hard bench, and it was wicked hot outside, as it always is in Houston, Texas. And I was trying to remember. I remember there was a woman speaker. She was pretty good. And she was like going, "When I was your age." And I was thinking, wow, I'm going to be that person. And I was like, what would I tell myself as an 18-year-old? What could I actually come up with? And it was really interesting because my son was worried that I was going to mess this up. But the idea of what has worked so well for me, kind of looking back, and I offer it as something for you to reflect on as you think about how you pass on your own passion in STEM. The answer to me was that I found that a playful approach to engineering was what made all the difference. And by play, everybody on this call is a nerd, really, right? You wouldn't have joined the IEEE. You wouldn't have gone to to your school to learn how to be an engineer if you didn't love the intrinsic way that, electrons move around. I mean, that's what makes us all so powerful as a group of engineers. Now, I found that playful spirit, I don't mean just like, after work going and throwing a football around or going fishing. That's called work-life balance. And I have to say, I haven't really tried that. But I mean, keeping that playful spirit, that curiosity, that we have when we find a technical problem that we just can't let go, that we're experimenting. We're not, it's like a baby. You watch a baby playing. She or he is not worried about making mistakes or who's watching or what the outcome is. How many of you, I'm sure it's true, can, remember learning a programming language and looking up and noticing it was 3:00 in the morning and you had forgotten, you'd lost track of time because you learned something. Well, I found that playful spirit had been the thing that has made my technical career as well as my personal career work. And it is the thing that has helped me make those gaps that we were talking about, those things where you have to make a leap across one domain where things were working to another. I find that you can't predict the future, but you can keep a playful and loose spirit and be adaptable and actually keep that passion. I found that whatever happens, even if it's really, really hard, having a playful spirit works. And for me specifically, as an engineer, as a hands-on engineer, I found that the kind of play, that the way that it manifests and that it can radiate out as all of us as STEM volunteers, is that I find that if I love making things and if I make things with people and then talk to people like all of you about making things, and then you go off and help other people start making things, it's this virtuous cycle. So this sort of playful, just for the sheer joy of making things and exploring, that is something that we as engineers have. It's funny because when you think about it, engineering is like many professions. I saw this cartoon in the New Yorker a year and a half ago, using it with permission, by the way. But it was an interesting point that they were talking about how people, as kids, we have this joyful spirit, and whether we're engineers or scientists or lawyers or whatever, we love what we're doing. And somehow, as we get older, that gets choked out of us, as whether we've got to go, get the best grades and then go, to the right grad school, go to the right company. And then we have, mortgage loans, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually work has a way of choking that play out of us. And not only is that a challenge for us as working engineers, we have to figure out how are we going to, keep that from losing our joy, because, the intrinsic joy of engineering is making things and being passionate. When you lose that, you take all the play out of work, it's just work. I saw a terrible statistic a couple of months ago. It says about 65% of working adults either hate or don't like their work. And that's such a terrible thing, especially to, address the problems that Kathy was talking about in the world. We need to get more people all over the world interested in STEM careers, because there is so much power in actually bringing people's creativity to science. And in fact, it's kind of a weird thing, because we actually talk about science. Sometimes I saw a National Academy of Engineering study a few years ago that surveyed people around the world, high school age students around the world, about what they knew about engineering. And they learned that it's hard, you must be good at math and science, and that it's not for everyone. Those were the three messages. And somehow we all know that it's not that. It's not. No one who's an engineer is actually getting the answer in the back of a book. Engineering is one of the few jobs where you're actually paid to be creative. I often say when I'm giving talks like this is, poets get paid to be creative, musicians get paid to be creative, artists get paid to be creative, engineers get paid to be creative. If you're an accountant and you're creative, you go to jail, So we're in a pretty lucky place, but somehow we're always focusing on logic, analysis, detail, and facts, which are absolutely the bedrock of engineering. I'm not saying that we lose that at all, because we are that left brain, but we also have an opportunity to share the right brain, creativity, empathy, imagination, and, as Kathy said, our passions, right? So we can actually share that in a very personal way. And my 40 years of looking back is, whether it's in my career or my STEM work, is when you share that passion with somebody else, it has a very good chance of actually getting through and having it be heard. I had, in one of my lessons, I looked back, I've been very lucky over my 40 years, is that when I look back at the times that I was most creative, like, objectively, like the most papers or most patents, I was actually working the hardest and playing the hardest. The times where I was least productive was when I was actually stressed and bored. And, everybody goes through those kind of gives and takes. So I would maintain that actually play drives innovation, but innovation also drives play. I was very lucky for about a decade to work, over the first 30 years of my career, I worked on some of the biggest computers that the world had ever seen at those times, big supercomputers that we built for my company. But what was really interesting is that in the kind of late 90s, it started to become evident that those big computers could also be used for fun. These are a couple of projects that I worked on. This was the PlayStation 3 chip. This was the Xbox 360 chip. This was the Nintendo Wii chip. This happens to be, not trying to scale, the Power 7 chip that was in the IBM Watson Jeopardy challenge. Especially these three chips were supercomputers that were designed to go under Christmas trees. They were incredibly complicated, but they were very different. The companies had come to us because we had made these very, very advanced technologies that were very good at computation, but they had very different kind of schedules. They had to be turned around. I remember having a half serious conversation about writing Mr. Bill Gates. We were in a group meeting saying we wondered if we could move Christmas out 2 weeks. You can imagine how that would have worked. But what was so interesting is while we were working so hard on these things, and we used to have a leaderboard of who had gotten the least sleep, it became such a great thing to be able to talk to my own kids in any place, because everybody, the kids loved, their gadgets, they loved their games, they loved their phones. And to actually then give permission to talk about how beautiful these machines are. And what's another thing, kind of at a more meta level, is that play not only drives innovation because you have to, make gadgets, but when I think about what drove the price down on semiconductors, what drove things like bandwidth up, like for wireless, what drove vector processing, like these graphics processing units in the PlayStation 3, which we currently, GPUs is what the basis for the AI explosion is right now. Most of that, not all of it, but much of it was driven by the society's interest in playing video games, watching streaming movies. So it's in a very concrete way, play drives innovation. But I want to change gears a little with you. So I think that we can share the passion for what we're working on with other people in a very emotional sense. And it really has a chance of kind of, sticking. But I will also tell you, I mentioned that in those times where you had these smooth sailing and then these discrepancies kind of things, sometimes there are just things that happen that you really can't, they're terrible and you can't control them. And we can't really predict the future. So I want to tell you a story, and it's a sad one, but it starts with a kind of an interesting place. Is one of the things that I love about our industry is that there are so many disciplines. And I really love my company's breadth. We have laboratories all over the world and disciplines. We have mathematicians and chemists and economists. We even had a corporate comedian at one time. And so I used my position in this company to be able to travel all over the world and talk to my colleagues. What I wanted to tell you about is a visit a couple of years ago to my friend Don Eigler, also an IBM fellow. He and his team were instrumental in making this, which was the world's smallest advertisement at the time. This picture is actually from 1998. This was an atomic force microscope, and it was actually used to create our company's logo in 18 xenon atoms on a piece of copper at about 4 degrees above absolute zero. Now, I went to see my friend Don because I knew he was a player. He liked playing. He had a $15 million machine, and like anybody with an expensive toy, you always kind of miss the first thing they did is write naughty words, but then they put all sorts of effort into making it fun for the public. They had made Valentine cards, and they made this, the world's smallest video. This is called A Boy and His Atom. These are carbon monoxide molecules, hand moved painstakingly using this $15 million machine. Now, I was there for a pretty sad reason. I was there. I'd mentioned that while IBM had no say in how many kids we had, we had 3 beautiful boys. Our oldest, Max, is now 33 and lives in Santa Fe, and he's a master maker. He's got a 5,000 watt cutting laser, and he's hardware, software, and he works at a place called Meow Wolf, and is actually committing his life to making and shares that with other people. So I couldn't be prouder. Our youngest son, Gabe, is 26, and he's a 4th year cancer biology PhD major, and is looking at the revolution, just like semiconductors changed so quickly over the last 4 decades. He's in computational biology and is using technology that's evolving as fast as semiconductors did then. And this is our son, Sam. And Sam was a fantastic snowboarder and a classical musician. But when he was 14 years old, in 2006, he and 2 friends were down on vacation in Florida, and they stepped off a curb, and a car swerved to avoid Sam's friend and hit Sam. And in that moment, his soul left his body, and we were 1,000 miles away, and we got that phone call, and we went down to do the hardest thing, but it was an easy decision in a hard time. Sam's was an organ donor, and his organs helped save 4 other people's lives. And this was devastating to us. He was such a great guy, and 15 years down the road, he's still so much in our lives. Well, I was there. How do these 2 stories fit together? And I know this is a sad thing to hear. And by the way, if I may, I don't know what you or your culture feel about organ donation, but if you have a moment and it's important to you, what's really important is that you talk to your family about what your wishes would be, because we knew Sam wanted to be an organ donor and that would honor him. But I was there using Don Eigler's $15 million machines, 2 6-packs of beer and some country western music. And I wrote our son's name with 33 carbon monoxide molecules on a piece of copper that was 3.4 degrees Kelvin because it had advanced. So what was I doing at this incredibly hard time? I was playing with technology, because what we had done when Sam died, we started making these rocks with his name on it. And if you actually can go look up samstones.org, SAMSTONES.org, we had started making these out of rock. And then a good friend of ours showed us how we could make them out of clay. And they have the website on the back. And we sent them all around the world. There's probably 60,000 of them all out there. And what was interesting is this was the hardest time of our lives, as you can imagine. Well, what I was doing, because it made me feel good and it helped me reach out to other people, I taught myself the worst computer language in the world, PHP, and helped create a WordPress site that we still have to this day. If you go to samstones.org, and you can see that people have put these things, they've been on the North Pole, the South Pole, into space. As a matter of fact, one is about to go up in a CubeSat. And I found that by sharing my passion, even in a really hard time, I started to feel part of this world again. And more importantly, and I know this is a tough story to hear, but what I found is I found great pleasure. That's when I started to discover this making things with other people, which is really all about STEM outreach. I am a huge MIT nerd. I went to MIT for my undergraduate, and I work there now at our MIT IBM lab. I've been part of the council there for many years, and I helped create Vomit, Vermont's own MIT club. And shortly after Sam died, a group of people came to our alumni group up at Vomit and said, can you guys help us? We weren't all guys. Can you all of you smart engineers, can you use your MIT education to help us build a device for scaring children? And I thought, well, now that is a very good use of an MIT education. So what we did is we got together a bunch of people, college students, high school students, and we built a device that was, it starts at 2 meters tall. It shoots up to 7 meters tall. It was computer controlled pneumatics. It has its meter wide head that as you talk, it went like this. Rah, 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 rah. This is me here, by the way. If you want a sense of scale, you can sort of see me down here at the bottom. Well, the idea of actually building something as a group, it was so uplifting. We worked with high school students in particular, and this thing I think it still exists, but for 6 years, we could calculate how scary that, whether kids would scream, whether their parents could scream. And over that, I started to realize that the more things that I built with other people, and again, mostly with students, you could build something for fun and get really into the meat of engineering. So for example, this is another 7 meter tall, this is I don't even know how to describe this. It's a carousel device for carrying hippies across the desert at an event I go to called Burning Man. We got together 40 students that helped us build this thing in 40 days. I know it sounds almost biblical, but we were working day and night to try to make this work. And again, it was an engineering marvel. It was a diesel hydraulic generator. It had all of these lights that I had actually imported from China. And I had students programming these things, students welding. And it was an amazing coming together. And I believe that we made more STEM converts by making something ridiculous like that. Now, I will say that sometimes STEM or STEAM, if you want to include the art, is really, it's if you can do something like I was talking about, like having a unique project, that's great, but we don't always have it. I don't always have the time to actually, organize things myself. Kathy was talking about these great resources at Try Engineering. There are so many things. The robots robots page at Spectrum looks fantastic. There are so many programs out there that we can actually reuse. So you don't have to make big, ridiculous objects to be able to share your passion. I'm very active, for example, in FIRST Robotics, and I'm one of the state leaders for that. And I find that those kind of programs are the ones that IEEE have make it easier. You don't necessarily have to spend all of your time inventing the content, but all you have to do is bring your passion to it and some organization, find a school, and you will be able to take your own passion, you'll be able to share it with others, and trust me, that will actually reflect and reignite and keep your passion going. I have found in my career at IBM that actually doing outreach with my colleagues at work has done more to foster good morale among my work colleagues, in addition to doing the right thing and trying to bring new people into STEM. It's been a real fantastic way of keeping your own technology, your own technical vitality in your organizations. So it's not something you do just because it's good for the world, it's good for you. And to be very specific, after 30 years of making chips, I have this policy of every 30 years, I got to mix it up. And my company decided that they were going to get into the Internet of Things. So I didn't even know IoT. I didn't even know how to spell IoT, but I knew that IoT, Internet of Things, was about taking small chips, like this, and hooking them up to big computers. And I was quite senior, and I said, hey, I'd like to be part of this IoT space. And they said, well, what do you know about IoT? Well, I showed them 7-meter tall robotic pumpkins and 7-meter tall remote control. They were all remote control devices where I had chips talking to big computers. So not only did I get to join that group, I actually got to go lead it. The only problem is they didn't tell me that it was in Munich. So for 2.5 years, every other week, I got on an airplane from Vermont and went to Munich and helped transform a building into a living, breathing IoT center. And it was so fun. Our job was to show in a fun and engaging way how Internet of Things could change the world. And we had like a big maker space up here. One of the things though, you always have to make time. One of the things about keeping that playful spirit in your work is you always have to make some time to misbehave. You can't do only what you're asked. If you do just what you're asked, you'll have an okay career. But if you really want to advance your career, you have to figure out a way of saving, kind of misbehaving a little bit, keeping some of that time separate so you could learn something else. And it was while I was flying back and forth to Munich, I started to fall in love with artificial intelligence. We had a problem where we were trying to figure out, how do you determine how many people were in a room without using a camera? So we had a young student, and again, this is the theme that whenever I need help, I go find high school or college students. I had a young college student who helped me figure out that if you could build a TensorFlow AI model with all the sensors we had in the building. And it turned out that if you looked at the time rate of change of the amount of CO2 and the volatiles we emit, it became you could build an AI model that was an excellent predictor of how many people were in the room, which we were using to control the AC and everything. Well, I wasn't supposed to be working on AI, but it turned out that after almost 3 years of 250,000 miles a year of flying, I was ready for something closer. And the wonderful thing is that our IBM had decided at that time to create a 10-year engagement with MIT. So it's almost like back to the future. I'm back at MIT, and where we have a laboratory which is looking at the future of AI, new AI algorithms, new physics for AI, so we don't destroy the planet because of the energy needs of AI applications and industries for things like healthcare and cybersecurity, and AI for shared prosperity to make sure that AI is fair and it doesn't destroy our privacy. So being back at MIT has been really, really fun. And we have a lot of work on, trying to do the serious work of AI. But it turns out that I found out that student interest in AI is skyrocketing. There are I remember back at MIT, the intro to the AI class at the beginning when I started working with them was about 350 people. Now it's almost 2,000 people. And it's starting even in high school. I'm working with a bunch of high school kids now who have great creative aspects. Well, it turns out that if you want to change society, the best thing you can do is help get the kids energized, because if the kids' minds are made up, that helps radiate out to the teachers, the parents, etc. So while I'm supposed to be doing serious stuff at AI, what I'm actually doing is trying to work with some students. I've been working with a bunch of high school, very bright high school students from Canada on trying to make AI more playful so that we can actually have more, people will lean into something that's fun. And if you get your phone out, and or a piece of paper, I'll give you something that you can take away from this that is a playful use of AI. The source code is on it. But basically, I've been making toys that you can run on your phone or tablet or computer that make somewhat beautiful music, and I would emphasize somewhat, using AI. This is the Veremin. Oh, I'm wearing the same shirt. So this is a small piece of code that runs completely privately. It does not take any information off, and you can run it on your, if you get it a second, I will actually give you a link to it. It actually can control things in the physical world, like a Tesla coil. Sorry about that. But if you take a picture of this, or go to ibm.biz/Veremin, Veremin, it's like a visual theremin. You'll actually see this application that we wrote with students that now students actually share all over the world. And if you look in the lower left corner, the source code is there. If you look in the upper right corner, there's a little paperclip thing, and you can actually share this link. And if people take a picture of it, they can go play with it. Just make sure your phone is not on mute when you load it. Turn your speakers up and go, put your hands up in the air and wave them like you just don't care. Then we actually have some tutorials around doing that sort of thing in the world. So I guess it's my thing. I know, even though I'm supposed to be doing serious stuff all the time, I can't seem to behave. And I'm just about to finish up. Sometimes that misbehavior, if you have an opportunity somewhere in your career, everybody gets stuck. And there was a time after our son's passing where I really didn't know what I needed to do. And I was thinking that I was going to leave engineering and go be a school teacher. And then I realized I am so disorganized. I would be a terrible school teacher. But one day, several years ago, I remember it was snowy. It was a snowy December day, and I went to my lovely hippie wife, and I said, "Lovely hippie wife, what should I do? Should I quit engineering? Should I go do something that that makes more difference in the world?" And she looked at me lovingly and she said, "Scruffy old husband, how do I know? I'm cooking. Why don't you go ask the cosmos?" So I literally went outside with my beer, looked up in the air and said, "What should I do?" And nothing happened, except the next day I got a call from a woman in LA who said, asked me if I wanted to be a scientist on a reality TV show. And I thought, I had never seen a reality TV show, but I thought, having a show about science for kids, what a great way. Any way I could do this. Well, I had to take a test. The test had questions like, I dream of killing people, true or false? Well, no. Aliens control my thoughts. Well, that's harder because, if they did control your thoughts, they would. Anyway, I had to go out there. I took we had to take things apart, put things back together, blow things up, and all of this crazy stuff. And I thought, I'm not going to get this show. Well, a couple of weeks later, I came back and I got a call saying, "Okay, you're on the show. You got to come out here and for 2.5 months, and you can't tell anybody where you are." And I thought, now's a good time to talk to my boss. Well, here's what happened.
We're on the edge of a global catastrophic disaster. Human conflict, nuclear bombs, natural disasters, chemical and biological warfare. Without warning, the world as we know it can come to an end.
That's where we live.
It's the near future. A viral outbreak decimates the world's population.
Well, I'll spare you the rest of it. But basically, it was a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. What we were there, it was me and 9 crazy people. And our whole job was to live for 59 days in this abandoned warehouse. And we had to figure out, that was, no food, no water. We had to go get dirty water from the LA River, which was 800 meters away. We ate a lot of whatever we could find. I mean, they made it easy. Reality TV has a lot of goofiness in there. We could find stuff like dog food and cat food. And let me tell you, when the zombies come, go for cat food. Cat food's great. Dog food is not so great. We ate a lot of rats and pigeons, but it was a show for Discovery. It was about inventing under constraint. And the whole thing was, how can we build back? And so we had to build water filters to take the green black water from the LA River, put it through sand and charcoal filters so that we could actually make clean water. We had to figure out how we were going to make electricity. Initially, we had car batteries, but they needed to be recharged. So we actually took an idea that I had learned when I was an exchange student in Austria about retrofitting gasoline engines to run on wood. You actually use incomplete combustion. You take an open wood fire, and then you have a small canister with restricted oxygen in it where you have wood chips, and you take that vapor, which has carbon monoxide, which is flammable actually, methanol, and a bunch of other tar stuff. And then you use a little bit of petrol. And what we did is we took a gasoline motor from like a lawnmower, the alternator from a car, put them together, started it with a few drops of gas. And as long as you could keep that wood going, you could actually run the alternator long enough to charge the batteries. Eventually, they got tired of us doing that, so that they suggested that we think of a way of doing solar power. And I'm like, who's going to believe that? Well, they let us break into a building with an axe and steal some conveniently hidden panels. And then what was fun about that is that using everyday objects, we had to create systems for actually building a solar tracker, using a nightlight from a bathroom, the cadmium sulfide cell that would actually, with a motor from a bus's windshield wipers, would move the panels whenever the sun moved. It was just so much fun. They kept raising the stakes. I was supposedly the professor, but they said, well, there must be other colonists around here. The show was called The Colony. And they said, could you make a radio? So it was really fun. I actually made a Tesla coil radio, kind of like what would have been on the Titanic. And it actually worked because we knew, because somebody 14 miles away actually heard the Morse code, but all of the camera people had earphones. And as soon as you would hit the key, they'd go, ah! It was all about working under constraint. And, the things that are facing the world right now, especially in, some parts of the world, you really have to deal with what the reality is, what the reality of the materials, what the reality of the problem. It was so uplifting. And there was 12 million people watching this, which was pretty crazy. So I want to close on one thing. I learned so many lessons from this. I learned about the importance of failure, that, for the most part, we were always like guarding our, because there were cameras on everything, and we didn't want to show if we were going to make a mistake. And halfway through, we realized making mistakes was an intrinsic part of engineering and science, and you had to be able to show that process. And I'm very proud, even though the show was entirely stupid. You can still watch it on Amazon Prime. It was called The Colony from Discovery Channel. I was on the first season, and I was a science advisor for the second season. But we learned about the importance of showing your process and showing your mistakes. I learned the importance. I really learned the importance of asking for help. Oftentimes we think it's a sign of weakness if we ask for help, and it's actually a sign of intelligence. I was trying to turn a car over to get the alternator out to make the generator. I was trying to do it by myself, and one of my colleagues came over and said, "Professor, you beep," called everybody together, and we moved it over. But also, if you're in a position to give somebody help, that's a real blessing. But the main lesson I want to leave you on is these are complex times, right? You're trying to fit in how you do your outreach with what you do in your career, what you do with your family. We always over program ourselves, and we worry so much. You know, from little kids, we worry that we got to study really hard so we get into the right classes in high school, so that we can get to the right exam scores, so we can go to the right college and get to the right job and we get promoted up there and, you know, make money. And we worry because every time we think that something's going to go terribly wrong and we're going to end up living in a ditch and not getting married to the right person and all this other stuff. And as I kind of go back to those kind of smooth sailing there, those disruptions, you never know what's going to happen. But if you have humor and you have playful spirit and you are flexible, and when life sends you something new, you just playfully go and see just go explore the world, it will take care of it. And this was driven home to me in this particular situation. So our show was 59 days in LA, hot, sunny weather, except for 3 days it rained. And the first time it rained, we had all been sleeping in, 10 of us were sleeping in 2 beds, just between us. And we were filthy. We were covered. We had been walking through the river and everything like that. I was so dirty. And it started raining. And all of my colleagues kind of ran out the front door to gather every little drop of water because it was really important. Instead, I flew out the back door, dropped my clothes, stood in the rain, and just tried to clean up. And I turned around, and there was one of those guys with a camera looking right at me. And I said, come on. He goes, I'd pick up that piece of plastic. Well, okay, that was day 3. Months later, before the show came out, I got asked to go down and talk to the number 2 person in my company, the head of marketing, and about being on a science reality show that was just about to be coming out on TV. He loved it. He asked me all these questions. We were supposed to talk for 20 minutes. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm driving home and I'm like, gosh, I wonder if he's really going to like it. Because like every third word is beep. So I called somebody and I said, how do you think that went? He goes, oh, he loved it. I said, well, what about like the language? He goes, nah, as long as you kept your clothes on. Oh no. So for 6 weeks, I was like thinking, oh my God, I've just destroyed my career. It's going to be terrible. And at the end of that 6 weeks, I'm sitting in a room. This is the last 45 seconds of the first episode after I picked up the plastic. And I thought, oh, my kids are seeing this. My parents are seeing this. The number 2 guy in my company is seeing this. And I was really like, oh, so worried. 6 weeks later, I was at an IBM event and I saw him and he came over and I was like, okay, here it comes. I'm going to get fired. And he came over and he said, I love that show. The only thing I can say is you've got to get more sun. And I was like, all of a sudden I realized I'd been worried about this for so long. So I would say the main thing is don't worry so much. These are tough times and play will actually get you through. So I would invite you to take that lovely engineering spirit that got you into this industry, that has gotten you this far, commit to playing more with it and sharing that passion with other people, because that is it's not the only way we're going to get STEM advocates. We have to talk to them about the importance of it. We have to tell them to work hard, but we can also show how fun and passionate it is. I found this George Bernard Shaw quote a few months back that says, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And I think if we can bring that out to the world more, we're going to do a better job at bringing new people into the wonders of engineering. So I want to say thank you very much. Sorry I talked so long, and I am very, very honored to be here. And thank you for everything you all do.
Thank you so much, John, for your inspiring presentation. You have shared very important lessons, and I'm sure all our participants have enjoyed hearing and learning from your experiences. I cannot think in a better way for starting this week around STEM outreach. We are now ready to take some questions from the audience. Well, first one is from Wen Tam. Hi, John. Is play only conducive to the STEM education of kids? How about teachers and parents?
What a fantastic question, Cam. I think that we all need to be playful. I mean, play is not an antidote to the world's problems, but it certainly makes everything easier. And what I always think about is, if you can teach one person to do something, that's great. But if you can teach someone who's in position to teach others, this virtuous cycle I'm talking about, that if you can teach parents to go and talk to their friends about passion, the best thing is to give a student something really cool, a fact, a piece of software or something that they can show their parents, the parents can show their friends. But think about actually educating the teachers. I'm sorry I didn't even mention that actually that is one of the most powerful multipliers. We're looking at trying to figure out how to take our passion and multiply it. Well, the main thing that we need to do is to make sure that the messages that they hear that students hear at the very earliest, even in elementary school, about engineering is a whole picture. Yes, it's very important. Yes, it can change the world. Yes, you do have to work hard, but oh my gosh, it's so fun. I mean, so I think trying to find ways that we can meet teachers. One of the things that I've noticed in my traveling around is that many teachers will tell you that they're not good at. I often hear that teachers say they're not good at math, and I'm saying everybody's good at math. Don't ever say that in front of. Don't ever. It's not even matter what you say. You should never not believe in yourself. So I think if we can reach out, I would love to hear, what's so great about this call is so many of you have your own programs. I would love to hear about your programs that you've found that have been able to get teachers and parents inspired. I think it's a great question.
Thank you, John, so much. Well, the other one comes from Anne Townley. Hi, John. Good to see you again. How would you recommend for those of us attending to talk about, in a quick and engaging way, IEEE and its important role in society?
Oh, Anne, it's great to hear from you again. I think that's a really interesting challenge. I mean, there's so many great stories out there of things that are going on in the world. Maybe your company or maybe IEEE, I'm sure in our vast trove of experience in IEEE, we could find some small bites, some small videos of amazing engineering. And I know that Try Engineering has some really cool material on it. Maybe we should come up with some sort of a quick, like quick things that you could share at a school, quick things you could share at a dinner party. And, I think the idea is having something that is very, very much in people's minds right now. I'm trying to think of what would be what's a recent engineering marvel that has happened. And to be able to tell the engineer behind, the engineering behind it. I would be very willing to work with some people to collect some of those sparklers, and I'm sure that material, it would just be a matter of kind of pointing out content that we have in this huge trove in IEEE. But I think that there's some simple stories like the miraculous. I remember just recently seeing comparing. It was on the 50th moon landing, and it was comparing the cell phones that we have now to the compute of the entire lunar landing, not just the what was on the lunar lander or the command thing, but in all of the Houston control towers. That is like less than a hundredth of the compute power of the thing you have in your phone. Think about that in 50 years. I think we can actually find a way of telling those stories with like quick hit, almost like a one-page story. I think it's a good question. And you know what, Anne, I would love to talk to you about that offline.
Sure, you can connect, and everyone is very excited for hearing more from you, John.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from Morel Fopamanmen. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the names. Says, John, I'm an undergraduate student and I'm almost through with my degree. It really freaks me out when I think of professional life. Are all the stuff we do in school really useful when we really get involved in professional life?
Nothing to be freaked out about, Morella. I mean, life is freaky for sure, but I think the answer is yeah. I think that it's funny. You learn two kinds of things in well, actually, let me say there's three kinds of things that you probably are studying in university. There's the fundamentals. There's the thermodynamics, the linear algebra, and stuff like that. I have found that the stuff that I ended up learning about basic physics, I'm a device physics person by training, but that stuff has stuck with me, and those fundamentals haven't changed very much. I think that stuff is really, really important. Then there's always this urge to cram in whatever the tooling of the current day is. Oh, you got to learn how to use this kind of computer or this kind of material. I found that stuff fades. But you know what actually has lasted me the most from my undergraduate and my graduate is those meta skills, the ability to organize yourself, the ability to advocate for yourself, the ability to work with others, the ability to communicate with others clearly, in your team or to the public, the ability to think about ethically about the impact of the decisions that you make from an engineering standpoint. Those kind of meta skills, which you learn sort of by, I don't want to say by accident. Most colleges are now spending more time on it. Those have been the things that I have worked with, that have lasted the longest. So the answer is yes, the stuff you're learning matters a lot. I'm kind of biased. I think that the fundamentals and those meta skills of working with people are really important. But I think that my main learning has always been learn by doing, open-ended problems, because that's what engineering is. But I think you're going to find that an engineering undergraduate really prepares you for problem solving, whether it's engineering per se or anything. I mean, engineers are problem solvers. And, I don't think I have to tell anybody on this call that we've got plenty of problems to solve. So don't freak out. It'll be fun.
Yes, indeed. Ivana Timotheus says, "Hi, John. I agree that engineer and art is a creativity-based job. However, they are also the fields that have high rejection rate, which is not easy to face. How to prepare ourselves to deal with that?"
That's a really, really interesting question, Ivana. I mean, the whole idea of rejection, we are brought up, we are all brought up in a culture of getting the right answer at one level or another, that we're going to get it. We're going to get that answer correct. There's only one answer, and we're going to be the one who gets it. And when the world doesn't work like that, there is no answer in the back of the book. And we're going to you'll quickly get to a point where you're disappointed either because, the problem that you're trying to work on doesn't, there's no good solution. The job you're trying to get, somebody else is there. The problem is that we are taught by the nature of getting the right answer that there is a right answer, and that sets us up for disappointment. My point about this playful spirit is you never know what's coming, and opportunities are there. What is it? Fortune favors the prepared. When you're thrown into something, including a rejection, all you got to do is kind of look around and say, okay, well, that was interesting. I learned. Let me try something else. It's really, I know it's easy to say and very hard to do, but rejection, it hurts in our gut. We actually feel it. But in the end, there are so many possible futures that your attachment to what that outcome was going to be is kind of artificial. It's sort of, it's like, oh, well, that's the thing that's supposed to happen. There is no supposed to happen. So what I would say, first of all, you have to feel what you feel. Don't deny that, if you get rejected, you got to kind of shake it off, but then say, what did I learn by that? And try something new, try again. So I think it's really a kind of the thing about rejection is rejection only even means anything in the context of an expectation. And expectations in this world are kind of a myth, right? We always think we know how things are going to work out. You just have to look around and say, that's rarely the case. So I think it's really just kind of keeping a light, playful, flexible and attitude that builds more resilience. So I would concentrate on the resilience, because let me put it this way. I've done a lot of patenting in my life, and not one, the more important the patent, the more rejection I got around it. The more novel an idea is, the more likely somebody is going to say that won't work, or that's already been done. And if you can't figure out how to kind of use that as a game, if you take the first rejection and you just kind of give up, That's not going to get you very far. So, kind of using that rejection as a resilience, almost like a game, that's kind of a good thing. And then, you'll evolve, you'll get through it. It's just like, driving down a road and there's bumps and rocks and stuff like that. You just get around them. Don't stop at the first thing. So rejection is just in our minds. It's expectation. Let go of it. That sounds very Zen. Easy to say, hard to do, but it's a practice.
Thank you, John. Kelly McKenna says, you talk about how society played a role in creating playstations and how society impacts technologies of today. The IEEE REACH program provides teachers with free resources that engage students in the societal and humanistic context of technology, all through the lens of history. How would you explain the value of these in STEM education? And I would also love to talk with you about the betterment for our electronic music lesson plan.
I would love to work with you on that, Kelly, because what I'm trying to do is create a family of things like the Veramin. I think you're on a really good point. I don't know if this answers the question, but I believe history. So I believe the human part of engineering is such an important thing. And I actually used to do a stage show called Inventors Like You. And one thing that I think sometimes we do is we put our inventors on a pedestal. And unfortunately, they're often old white guys, right? And, that's somebody else. Oh, that's, Albert Einstein or somebody, we put them up on a pedestal and we tell this history like it's like a Greek statue or something that we're talking about. I think the idea of how you can bring that into STEM is if you can personalize it. So in my Inventors Like You, I really was trying to talk about, most inventions come from necessity. And you can go and, if you go and look at some of our sections like in India or other emerging places, you'll find innovation that happens on the ground. You'll find innovation that is happening out of necessity, and telling those stories. If we can tell those kind of stories of invention, so that all inventors are not old dead people. They're actually, people of every gender, every color, every creed, and that the inventions can be small or big. I think that's a way, because I think in the end of what you want to do in a STEM thing is you don't want to have it like a dry museum, is look at these, very famous people. I'll never be that famous person. And instead bring it into someone's heart. And I think by telling the story in that way, we can say, this is you. Invention is, I've often believed, and particularly in the invention of technology, there's a switch. I remember when I first started patenting, my first patents, kind of going to the last question, almost everybody's first patents are rejected. And I almost stopped. But then somehow there's a switch that turns on and said, oh, that could be me. I can be an inventor. I think if we can personalize and warm up the story to tell history of innovation is something that is personal. If we can tell personal stories from our own history of small inventions, and that, not every invention is earth-shattering and done by somebody, bigger than life. Inventions is something that we do all the time. And if we can kind of get that to come into people's hearts and say, oh, I'm an inventor. You can, do this experiment. Go into an elementary school, go to kindergartners and ask, or maybe second grade. Second grade is a good place. Second or third grade, and ask the kids if they're inventors. And if you can explain the concept, most of them will say, yeah, I invent stuff. And you can give them stuff on, like a bunch of stuff, and they'll build things, and they'll say, look what I invented. You go ask that same thing by, a college freshman, and most people won't identify. So we're actually, it's there, that whole spirit. We got to figure out how we reaffirm that and don't choke it out of it and make inventions somebody else. Why don't we talk about that? Come reach out to me on the Veramin, and let's talk about creating some Inventors Like You kind of storylines. I think that's a great question.
Another more question. Rebecca says, how to explain that a non-traditional engineering path, liberal undergrad major with STEM minors, still contains problem solving, creativity, persistence, and the backbone of being capable, but with additional soft skills?
Rebecca, I think what's really interesting about your question is the word still. It's actually the essence. Okay, I've got to come out. I'm a history minor, so I have a history minor, and I found that that I learned, when I mentioned before about the meta skills of of what you learned in school, of being the sort of critical thinking, uh, working with others, communication. I actually think that, what's really interesting about the word STEM or STEAM is that we think about adding the arts. Let me talk about the liberal arts into engineering. It's almost like we want to really double down on that. I think there's no still contains problems. I think non-traditional engineering paths, have the same, are putting the human into engineering. I've been very happy to see the topic of design as a real discipline starting to be taught in undergraduate engineering programs, because the sort of human important, just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. And if you build something, what could the unintended consequences? If you look at some of the questions that are coming up around privacy and AI right now, some of the big companies, a lot of it is, engineering something without actually considering what the broader impact would be. So I actually think you're bringing something very, very important into it. And actually, the more I think about it, the more we should think about when we do our own outreach to talk about that, that those quote soft skills are every bit as important, and the human centric engineering. Not every aspect of engineering has that human centric component, but ultimately everything we do has impact in the world, and if we have to sort of sign up for that. And I got to tell you, I don't see that getting enough play, and I think maybe that's a really interesting thing from IEEE STEM outreach, to kind of highlight that humanistic thing. I'd like to think more about that. I think it's a really good question. But I think you have nothing, if I'm reading from this, that there's almost an apologetic aspect that, hey, you're doing non-traditional engineering and it still has those. I mean, you actually represent what we need to do more of.
Thank you so much, John. There are great comments from all the audience, but unfortunately, our time has come to the end. Thank you so much again for sharing your time and your thoughts with us. It has been delightful hearing you today. And to all participants, thanks for joining us. I invite you to go and visit the expo, and I hope you can connect again with us tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time to the talk Inspiring a Passion for STEM Education through IEEE Resources. Have a good rest of the day and continue inspiring students through STEM education. Bye-bye.
Thank you for all you do.